The discussion's really been crackling here.
DC invented the whole notion of a multiverse.
Does this just feel like a really weak excuse to make 15 different Batman films?
How Warner Brothers is dealing with their overseas customers.
I think it's completely meaningless.
Not caring that half of the world could not go to the theater because they were all closed.
Do you think that there's an opportunity here to tell a compelling story using the multiverse vehicle? So I just want to dive into this right away with the panel. And the question here, or rather, I'm going to start with a quote from the same article, sort of going into a new place that DC wants to take its properties and sort of explaining certain things that they're going to be doing. But enough foreshadowing. Here's the quote. To make all the storylines work, DC Films will introduce movie audiences to a comics concept known as the Multiverse, parallel worlds where different versions of the same characters exist simultaneously. Coming up, for instance, Warner Brothers will have two different film sagas involving Batman, played by two different actors running at the same time. So my question for the champions is, what do you think of WB using the multiverse to explain multiple iterations of the same characters that are going to be running at the same time in live action? Does this just feel like a really weak excuse to make 15 different Batman films? Or do you feel like they're on solid ground with this multiverse strategy? I want to turn to Taylor to field this first.
DC Comics, I believe, you can correct me on this, I believe invented the whole notion of a multiverse for this very reason, because they had lots of different comic storylines going on that were not in sync with each other. Superman and Superboy could not exist in the same universe. It didn't make any sense. So they created the multiverse to fix that. It looks to me like the DCEU is trying to do the same thing. And I don't like multiverses in general, but if that's what they have to do to fix it, they have to use this crutch and say it's a multiverse, which is why our stuff doesn't sync properly, because we tried and we can't do it because we're not as good as Marvel. If that's the tool they have to use to make it work, I mean, I hope it does work for them. I just hope they're smart about how they do it.
Do you think of it as something that is a quick fix, or do you think that there's an opportunity here to tell a compelling story using the multiverse vehicle?
It's a quick fix. Bottom line, it's
short
a quick
and
fix.
Sweet.
But I mean, at least they've got a fix. Like I pointed out in the earlier segment, most franchises of the past didn't even bother fixing. They just didn't explain the inconsistencies at all. And you don't have to go all the way back to the Universal monsters. You can look at the X-Men. All right, they're riddled with inconsistencies, and most of the time they just ignore them. And a whole bunch of and I don't hate the X-Men franchise. I think it's okay. It has a lot of up and downs, just like the DCEU. But again, inconsistencies that they just ignore. And I can point out a whole bunch of others. It's really hard to do an MCU, to do a shared universe like this. I mean, let's look at the past. Christopher Reeve's Superman, iconic, right? He did two good movies, two god-awful movies, and a mediocre Supergirl spinoff that flopped at the box office. Spider-Man, Raimi, 3 great movies, but couldn't get a fourth one out. All right, so trying to do 9, 10, 15, 20 movies like the MCU with 10 different main characters is not an easy task. So, DCU's trying. Again, I give them credit for trying. They're just going to be the second best at it for the foreseeable future. So, back in the 80s, it was action movies. You had the Rambos, and then you had the Missing in Action starring Chuck Norris, okay? They were similar. One was really good. The other was fun popcorn movies that you can sit back and enjoy. But if, Riff Tracks or MST3K would tear them to shreds, doesn't matter. You can still have fun with them.
That's a perfectly legitimate answer, and I really do appreciate the deep dive on taking us through some of the history of the multiverse. I will say that it does seem like DC wants to use this as a business tool, that they've made the decision to pump out a lot of different content that might overlap. You might have two different versions of the same character, and it feels like the multiverse is umbrellaing a business decision. Marvel is also making moves in the multiverse world, so as it often works out, the two are competing with each other. But this really isn't about Marvel and Marvel's approach. We can talk about that in another episode. But I want to talk to the Grandmaster about your thoughts on the usage of the multiverse in upcoming DC releases to sort of explain continuity, basically.
Yeah, this has Days of Future Past written all over it, but it was I usually refer to Days of Future Past as Days of X-Men Retcon, and what they're gonna do at DC feels a bit like the same. And to me, as a fan, or at least somebody who follows the comic book movies that come out, I think it will be fine. I mean, we have different versions of Batman before. Now we're gonna have them at the same time. Yeah, well, I will be able to figure it out. I'm concerned about general audiences, though. You go to a Batman movie. Hey, next year there's another Batman movie. Hey, Batman character's different. Okay, they must have recast. Not everybody's gonna follow everything. And then the year after you get a third Batman movie, and it's the guy from the first one again. I think people are gonna be confused, and they're gonna get lost, and they're gonna give up. DC is taking a massive risk doing this, and especially if
before I let you go further with that, I want to counter. You say it is a massive risk, but they've been successful with it in the television medium. And Hamada, in this very same article, and I quote, "I don't think anyone else has ever attempted this, but audiences are sophisticated enough to understand it. If we make good movies, they will go with it." What do you have to say to Hamada on that quote?
Well, he could be right. No, I will not say he can't be right. I just have a different feeling. I have a feeling that general audiences, I mean, I've been in the theater watching Avengers Infinity War, and then I hear somebody say, hey, I haven't seen Batman yet. I mean, people are not going to be as invested as us fans into those movies and gonna be able to tell everything apart. And especially if you mix it up with something like HBO Max and have TV spin-offs in there, or have HBO Max movies exclusive for that the streaming service, and you have some crossovers or something. For the people who follow everything, it will be fine, but people are going to get lost. And I really think it's a risk that could hurt them in the long run.
Got it. Understood. And perfectly valid and legitimate response. Turning to Stanton, our producer, champion among champions, talk to us a little bit about your feelings on how the DCEU is going to apply the multiverse. Do you think it's a strategic blunder? Do you think it's a way out of the sort of mixed and tepid responses, and then the really high highs they've had and some of the abysmal lows?
I think it's completely meaningless. I like the idea of them doing multiple different versions. No problem with that at all. I think it's fine. I mean, some of the points that Grandmaster pointed out, that perhaps it gets confusing to people. I don't know. Maybe it could, but I'm not too concerned about that. I really don't have any issue with them doing, like multiple different versions of characters. Just, don't use buzzwords like Earth 1 and Earth 2 and try to act like there's some sort of related thing. They're not. Just let them be separate, let them be their own thing. And I think that they just think, enough people think that those buzzwords are cool, and that you can think that, Pattinson is in Earth 1 or 2 or whatever, and Michael Keaton's in Earth 1,000,000, and that doesn't mean anything. They're just doing their own thing. What difference does it make if you call it Earth 1 or Earth 2? It doesn't mean anything. There's a way to do a multiversal concept. To me, that to me, that type of universe I just described is an excuse. It's just using words because they think people will show up. But I mean, you could do multiversal concepts to explore different things. Like if you and the movie that just came to mind was Sliding Doors, I think it was called. It was a love story thing with Gwyneth Paltrow or something. Somebody made me watch it one time. Who cares? But it just involved her making one decision at one point. One time she got on a train, another time she didn't get on the train, and like how her life dovetailed and was different in those in by that one choice. And I think that's a really interesting concept. That's a really cool way to use a multiverse. Like, what would you have been like if you made this other choice? But just having completely different versions of characters and just saying somehow one's in one Earth and one's in that. Oh, okay. I don't know. I don't see anything really enlightening coming out of that, or particularly narratively useful coming out of that. So, but maybe I'm wrong. I will say the narrative that I heard set up for the Flash movie at least has some potential. I think it's got a lot of stuff in it, and I don't really trust Warner Brothers a little bit to handle that. I'm also a little leery about how Spider-Man 3 might be handled, and that's Marvel Studios. I've got a little more trust in them, but I think the idea of maybe bringing in other versions and having them relate can be good, as long as there's a little more to it than that. But I just, with Warner Brothers, I'm not at all confident that they're doing anything special other than using it to sell tickets. So,
wow. And there you have it. The panel has sounded off on the multiverse. We've got a lot of trepidation. We've got some wait and see attitudes here. So there's a mix of feelings amongst the champions in the arena around the multiverse. I want to add to the multiverse discussion very quickly by just saying that I agree with Stanton in that just taking a bunch of films that you have and putting them under an umbrella called the multiverse with multiple different versions of the same character, unless it's supported by a big event, hopefully that comes out of Flashpoint. It's kind of like a little bit of sleight of hand, if I had to say so myself. But I want to dive into the next question with the panel. And the discussion's really, really been crackling here. So if you're at home, please do stay tuned. I do not know how things are going to turn out or what people are going to say here, but we're having some real talk about DC. And I think if you're a fan in any way, shape, or form, you're going to want to stay tuned. So my next question for the panel is, we've got several long-running CW shows that are slated to be canceled. I believe Black Lightning is going into a fourth and final season. Supergirl just waved goodbye, and I think there are at least two other. Arrow itself has run out of steam. So the CW as this extension of the DC brand and not necessarily connected to the DCEU. And of course, that's where confusion comes in all the time. Are these things under the same umbrella or not? But taking them into consideration with the DC brand, is the Arrowverse still viable? Or should it be folded into DC programming on HBO Max, rebooted? What's your thoughts on this? I want to turn to Taylor to start the discussion as far as the CW, aka the Arrowverse.
Well, the Arrowverse successfully did a multiverse. Supergirl was on a different Earth from Arrow and Flash and later Batwoman. And it's been an extremely successful franchise for CW. Now, CW's bar is way down here, but we can have a whole nother podcast about television and CW. But as far as the Arrowverse itself, yes, Arrow has run its course. After 8 seasons, it canceled. Supergirl is going to have a 6th and final season. Black Lightning, a 4th and final season. So we still have Legends of Tomorrow, Flash, Batwoman, Superman and Lois premiering its first season this year. I think it's going to go on for a while yet. I think it still has some juice. I think they're talking about some other spinoffs. I think they could dig deeper into the DC characters and bring in some more. Stargirl, I'm not sure if she's in the same universe, but they could fold her in the same way they did with Supergirl, because originally Supergirl, as I said, was in a different universe. And if those of you remember when they did Crisis on Infinite Earths, they actually crossed over with the DCEU and with a whole bunch of others, including I think Titans and Doom Patrol, some of those HBO or DC used to be DC Universe, now HBO Max shows. They were all shown to be existing in different universes, and there was even a meeting between the two Barry Allens, one from the DCEU and one from the CW, the Arrowverse. So bottom line is, I think it's got a few good years left in it, and I think they're going to drag it as far as they can, obviously for business reasons. But I think we're like in the middle. I had to say it. We're in the middle, maybe in the final third of the Arrowverse, but I think it's still got a ways to go.
Taylor, following on that, what do you say to fans who feel like the CW is bottom of the rung DC content and we really just need to cancel it all, move on, reboot? What do you say to those folks?
I understand it because some of the writing is abysmal, but you also have to understand, these are TV shows. This is a shared universe within television, which is a whole very different environment than movies. It's hard enough in movies. It's probably there's even other complications in television. The need to produce huge numbers of episodes year after year makes it very difficult. So I do understand that, and believe me, I feel it, because like I said, some of the writing is just headbanging, but they've done a pretty good job overall of keeping it relatively consistent and bringing these characters together to do big things at certain times. Their annual crossover events. So I'm still enjoying it.
Outstanding and well spoken on that. I want to turn to Grandmaster. CW, fold up the tent. HBO Max, reboot. What's your feeling?
Well, I watched a fair amount of the Arrowverse. I stopped at a certain moment because to me it felt like it was repeating itself all the time, and like Taylor said, some of the writing was, well, cringy and abysmal. I'm fine if they can keep continuing it. I mean, there are a lot of fans out there who like it, and why not let them have a few more years in the sun? I could also see a reboot because actually the concept of the CW shows is more of what I want from DC. Like Taylor said, it was a fairly successful multiverse universe. It worked. It was always fun seeing those characters coming together from the different shows on those crossover events. If you're going to do TV spin-offs on HBO Max, why not reboot it and get some shows with the same? Actually, CW or the Arrowverse is a template of what DCEU or DC could do, and if you want to bring it all into with better writing, better acting, higher production value into HBO Max, I could see that be very successful. I would be interested if we ever get HBO Max in my country, but that's another story. I would be interested in seeing that, actually. If you look at the production value of the shows that are currently running on Disney Plus for Star Wars, The Mandalorian or WandaVision, it's movie-like quality. If you do a CW Arrowverse type of thing, and that with those higher production values like that, like those shows I just mentioned on HBO Max, I think they have a hit.
Wow. Interesting take on the CW. I almost want to say that I didn't expect that from you, Grandmaster, but you've been quite charitable with the CW. Taylor, you had a quick follow-on?
Yeah, just a little bit on the business side. Of course, Warner Brothers half owns the CW, with CBS Paramount owning the other half. And these shows are a huge part of that network's income. Not just from it has horrible ratings, live ratings on the Nielsen's. Okay, we all know that. But these shows get sold to Netflix, and they get sold to international distribution all over the world. So they're produced in mass quantities to get a specific return on investment. If they took the Arrowverse right now, took it off the CW would have to fold its tent. It would have like 3 shows left. So I don't think they're going to do that in the near future. I think it's working for them. They get a lot of views on streaming, on the CW streaming app, and on Netflix. Like I said, a lot of these shows get watched on Netflix. And also, again, they get that income from that international syndication. And again, they're still cranking them out right now. You know, Legends of Tomorrow still has a 6th season coming. They haven't announced an end to it. They always announce the final seasons for CW shows, which is why Batwoman will get another season, because they haven't announced that number 2 is its final season. So it will get a 3rd season, which means it will get a 4th season. So I don't think they're going anywhere.
All right. I see, Grandmaster, that you have a follow-on, but I want to give Stanton a chance to respond to this. So I'm going to ask you to hold that thought for just a little bit longer. And Stanton, my question for you is really the same question or a variation on it that I've been giving to the rest of the panel. Is the CW this gateway drug that can be used to sort of pull people into DCU fandom in the theaters and on HBO Max, or do you think low quality production, low writing, low ratings, do they really just need to fold this up and sort of get more unified in terms of the strategy?
I don't think they need to fold it up at all. I think if whoever enjoys it, keep on enjoying it, man. I admit I don't have really any experience with it, or very much, very, very little. But is in terms of low production quality, I honestly don't think that matters. Weird little tidbit about me. I don't think graphics or imagery and stuff in films is really the leading thing. I could perfectly enjoy a story that has very limited production value. I mean, you can go back and watch like Humphrey Bogart films or stuff, and you're dealing with things on very limited sets. And superhero genre, you can look at maybe like Batman Returns. A lot of this was on like a single set. It doesn't have to be high fancy Doctor Strange quality, trippy, crazy, high production graphics all the time. I think that doesn't matter at all. What I'd like to see them do is just handle the writing better. I don't know in what ways they can do that, but just kind of linking back to the multiverse idea we were just discussing, I'd rather see them just let these shows be their own thing and kind of don't tell me that they're all separate until that one day you just kind of want to have them all meet each other randomly. And they walk through a space hole or something. I don't know, but I don't think they need to do that. Maybe it's interesting. I don't know. I don't find that to be particularly interesting. But just in general, just as long as the writing's good, I think they'll be fine. And whoever enjoys it can. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I really am. There's one potential conflict they have, that if they're going to start having higher production shows on HBO Max, there's a chance for some confusion to sneak in there. Like, are they gonna keep running like a Supergirl show on CW, but then also have Supergirl on HBO Max, and the Supergirl on HBO Max counts, but the one on CW doesn't? I don't know. Maybe that doesn't matter. It might not matter. It's fine, I think. In terms of just I think the strongest thing they could do with it is get people experienced with their other characters. We talked earlier about expanding their brand, getting into some of these characters that they haven't really focused on. Maybe get away from the Bat family a little bit, and focus on some other characters that DC hasn't really brought to the forefront. And using a platform like that to do that, I think is perfectly viable and a really good thing to do. So I'm for it.
Wow. So really, really interesting discussion on the CW. It seems the majority of the champions feels that there is a place for it in the DCEU strategy, or the WB/DC overall strategy. I want to close out on this question with a final thought from the Grandmaster.
Yeah, my thought is not so much about the Arrowverse, but it's more about how Warner Brothers is dealing with their overseas customers, and that's another issue and I will quickly share my thoughts. We don't have the CW in my country. We don't have HBO Max in my country, and my country is just an example. So they must be really careful with their release strategy, because the overseas market may not be what they are focusing on. We saw that also with the Wonder Woman release. They just released it on December 25th on HBO Max and in theaters, not caring that half of the world could not go to the theater because they were all closed and had no access to HBO Max outside of the United States. If that's actually a concern, and not so much for me, because I'm not the biggest fan, but the fans outside of the United States do have a right, and I think should have a right, to watch things unspoiled at the moment of release. And Warner Brothers has a tendency to not care about people outside of the United States, and that's something they really need to fix.
Well, I think they're working on that. I was probably the only one who tuned into the AT&T investor call a little earlier this week. And it looks like the international rollout starting in places like Latin America is, I want to say, on pace. I think by the end of the year, we should see improvement in that situation. So credit where credit is due. I know historically they've had trouble sort of dealing with their constituency outside of the U.S., but I think they realize that in order to be competitive with the Disney Pluses of the world and Netflix of the world, they're making some strides there. So thanks again, guys, for all of the comments on this particular question. I want to turn to our next question, which I think is going to be a little bit of fun, sort of lift the tone just a bit. But which unproduced DCEU projects would you like to see WB prioritize? And before you...